The morning air in New York City was sharp and cold, carrying the smell of roasted coffee beans from the cafes that lined the busy streets. The sound of car horns, footsteps, and distant chatter filled the atmosphere. The city was alive, but for David Miller, it didn't feel that way. David was 24, recently graduated from college, and still searching for a stable job. He had come to New York with big dreams, dreams of success, independence, and a life that looked like the ones he saw in movies. But dreams, he was learning, came with a price. His wallet was nearly empty. His rent was overdue. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from his landlord and his mother back in Ohio. He hadn't told her how bad things really were. He didn't want her to worry. David stood outside a small corner cafe called Morning Brew. The glass windows were fogged up from the warmth inside. He could see people laughing, sipping coffee, typing on laptops. They all looked comfortable, successful, maybe even happy. Then, something caught his eye. On the cafe window, in bright red letters, was a sign that read "Free coffee for new customers." David's heart jumped. Free? That was something he could afford. He hesitated for a moment, glancing down at his worn shoes and empty wallet. He hadn't eaten breakfast, and the cold wind was biting through his thin jacket. After a few seconds, he decided to go in. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered. The warmth hit him instantly. The smell of freshly baked muffins and dark roast coffee filled the air. It felt like stepping into another world. Behind the counter stood a cheerful woman in her 40s wearing a green apron. She smiled as he approached. "Good morning. First time here?" she asked warmly. "Yes," David said, returning the smile. "I saw the sign outside, the one about free coffee." "Oh, yes," she said brightly. "Welcome to Morning Brew. What would you like to try? A cappuccino, latte, or black coffee?" David paused for a second. "A latte, please." "Coming right up," she said, turning to the coffee machine. As she worked, David looked around. The cafe was cozy, brick walls, wooden tables, soft jazz playing in the background. There were students studying, an old man reading a newspaper, and a couple sharing a quiet breakfast near the window. For the first time that day, David felt a little bit of peace. Maybe, he thought, this was a sign that things were about to change. The woman brought his drink over. The aroma was rich and comforting. "Here you go," she said with a smile. "Your free coffee." David's eyes lit up. "Thank you so much," he said, taking a grateful sip. It was perfect, creamy, warm, with just the right touch of sweetness. He was about to head for the door when the woman suddenly called out, "Oh, wait, sir." David froze. "Yes?" She hesitated, her tone softer now. "I'm so sorry. The free coffee, it comes with a small purchase, like a muffin or a sandwich." David's smile faded. "Oh, how much is a muffin?" $3, she said apologetically. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $1 bill. His stomach tightened. The woman noticed. "I'm really sorry," she said kindly. "It's company policy." David nodded, placing the cup back on the counter. "No worries," he said quietly. "Thanks anyway." He stepped back out into the freezing air. The warmth of the cafe disappeared behind him, replaced by the noise of the city. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the people rushing by. Her words echoed in his head, "It's company policy. Nothing is really free." That morning, as David walked down the busy street, clutching his $1, he didn't just feel cold. He felt something deeper, the first hard lesson of city life. In New York, nothing is free. Not even a cup of coffee. The wind whipped through the streets of Manhattan as David walked aimlessly, his hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets. He could still smell the coffee he couldn't afford. The city around him seemed to move too fast, people in business suits talking on phones, delivery trucks honking, and street vendors shouting over one another. New York was full of opportunity, or so people said. But David was beginning to wonder, opportunity for whom? He stopped at a small park near Union Square and sat on a cold metal bench. The morning sun peeked through tall buildings, but it did little to warm him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through job listings. Marketing assistant, experience required. Office clerk, must have references. Internship, unpaid. Unpaid. That word made him laugh bitterly. Even work wasn't free in New York. He remembered his mother's voice over the phone last week. David, honey, you are so smart. I know something good will come soon. Just keep believing. He missed her optimism. Back home in Ohio, people helped each other. His neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, always shared her homemade pies. His best friend Mike would lend him money if he was short on gas. But here, in this concrete jungle, kindness felt like a luxury. David sighed and checked his bank up. $8.74 left. That was all. No savings. No job. No family nearby. Just then, a man approached him. He looked about 50, wearing a thick jacket and holding a paper cup with a few coins inside. Spare some change, brother, the man asked, his voice rough but polite. David hesitated. For a second, he almost laughed. Me? Give money? He barely had any himself. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I wish I could. The man nodded slowly. It's okay, he said, smiling faintly. I get it. This city eats you alive if you're not ready. David looked up. Yeah, you can say that again. The man chuckled, shaking his head. You look new here. Let me guess, came to chase a dream. David nodded, embarrassed. Yeah. I thought New York was the place to make something of myself. The man stared at the skyline, his eyes tired but wise. It can be, he said. But it'll charge you for everything, your time, your peace, even your hope. Nothing here is free, not even the air you breathe. His words hit David hard. He wanted to argue, to say that wasn't true, that good things could still happen. But deep down, he knew the man was right. Before he could say more, the man smiled again. Anyway, take care of yourself, kid. And remember, the only thing you can give freely is kindness. Everything else, this city will bill you for. He walked away slowly, leaving David alone on the bench. For a long moment, David just sat there, thinking. The city noise faded into the background. Nothing is free, he whispered to himself. He stood up, determined not to give up yet. If this city was going to test him, he would fight back. As he walked toward the subway station, the sound of the city returned, loud, restless, alive. Somewhere deep inside, David felt a small spark, the beginning of resilience. He didn't have money. He didn't have luck, but maybe, just maybe, he still had hope. 2 days later, David woke up to the sound of his old phone buzzing on the nightstand of his small apartment in Brooklyn. The cracked screen lit up with an email notification. To subject, job interview invitation, Brightwave marketing date, tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. Location, 5th Avenue, Manhattan. David's heart skipped a beat. Finally, a chance, he read the message 3 times just to make sure it was real. It wasn't a dream. After sending out more than 50 applications in the last month, someone had actually replied. He sat up in bed, looking around his small, messy room. The walls were bare, the fridge almost empty, and his only suit hung wrinkled on a chair. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something new, hope mixed with fear. This is it, he whispered. Don't mess it up. The next morning, the sky was grey, and the subway was crowded. David squeezed into the train, holding his folder of printed resumes close to his chest. Around him, people were glued to their phones, half asleep or lost in their thoughts. As the train rattled toward Manhattan, he repeated his introduction in his head. Hello, my name is David Miller. I recently graduated with a degree in business communication. He'd said it so many times that the words almost lost their meaning. When he finally stepped out onto 5th Avenue, the city seemed even larger, louder, and faster than before. Glass buildings rose like mountains, and expensive cars lined the streets. He looked down at his scuffed shoes and straightened his thrift store tie. Fake it till you make it, he muttered. He entered Brightwave Marketing, a modern office with white walls and blue lighting. The receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. Good morning, sir. You're here for the interview. Yes, David said nervously. David Miller. Please have a seat. They'll call you in shortly. He sat on a leather chair and tried not to stare at the other candidates, 3 of them, all dressed perfectly, checking their watches, calm and confident. One of them even had a shiny briefcase. David had only a second-hand backpack. After what felt like forever, a tall man in a grey suit came out. David Miller. Yes, sir. Come with me. The man led him into a glass office overlooking the city. David could see Central Park in the distance, green and beautiful even under the cloudy sky. Have a seat, the interviewer said. So, tell me about yourself. David smiled politely, took a deep breath, and began. He talked about his degree, his part-time work in college, his passion for marketing. He tried to sound confident even though his voice trembled a little. The interviewer nodded, scribbling notes. You seem eager to learn. That's good, he said. But we're a small company, and we value experience. You don't have much of that. David's stomach tightened. I understand. I'm ready to work hard, to learn fast. The man smiled faintly. That's good to hear. Tell you what, we have an internship program. You get real experience, meet clients, build your resume. David's eyes brightened. That sounds amazing. However, the man added, it's unpaid for the first 3 months. After that, maybe, and I mean maybe, we could consider hiring you. David froze. Unpaid. Yes. But think of it as an investment in your future. Many people start this way. He nodded slowly. He wanted to protest, to say that he couldn't even afford rent, but instead, he forced a smile. I'll think about it, he said quietly. The interviewer stood up and shook his hand. Great attitude. That's what we like to hear. Let us know soon. As David stepped back onto the street, the cold wind hit his face again. The city lights flickered on, one by one, as the evening fell. He walked slowly toward the subway, thinking about the offer. He had waited so long for a chance, but now that it came, it wasn't what he expected. He whispered to himself, even opportunity isn't free. And as the train rumbled into the station, he realized something. In this city, even chasing your dreams came with a price tag. The next morning, David sat in his small kitchen with a cup of instant coffee, staring at his phone screen. The email from Brightwave Marketing blinked back at him. Please confirm your participation in our internship program. He hadn't slept much. He had gone over it again and again in his head. It wasn't paid. He could barely afford rent. He was already living off peanut butter sandwiches and cheap noodles. But still, it was a chance. After a long pause, he took a deep breath and clicked reply. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd love to join the internship. He hit send. His heart sank, but at the same time, something in him felt alive. He was finally doing something. Day one. Brightwave Marketing was bright, clean, and fast-paced. Employees typed quickly, phones rang constantly, and ideas flew through the air like paper planes. David arrived early, dressed in the same wrinkled shirt and borrowed tie. A young woman named Chloe, one of the senior assistants, greeted him at the door. Welcome to Brightwave, David. You're our new intern, right? Yes, that's me. Perfect. I'll show you around. She led him through a maze of desks and computers. The office smelled like coffee and ambition. Everyone seemed busy, eyes glued to screens, heads bent over projects. You'll be helping with client research, social media posts, and making coffee runs, Chloe explained cheerfully. We're a small team, so everyone does a bit of everything. David nodded, trying to keep up. He didn't mind hard work. He just wanted to belong somewhere. By lunchtime, he had already made 6 trips to the printer, fetched 3 coffees, and organized a messy storage cabinet full of marketing flyers. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He didn't have money to buy lunch. Instead, he sat outside the building, eating a granola bar he had brought from home. He looked up at the sky between the skyscrapers. This is what starting from the bottom feels like, he whispered. The weeks that followed days turned into weeks. David worked long hours, often staying late. He created reports, updated spreadsheets, and helped brainstorm new marketing ideas. He didn't complain when people forgot he wasn't paid. He smiled when his boss said, "Good work, Miller. Keep it up." Those small words kept him going, but life outside the office was hard. His savings were gone. His landlord warned him about the rent. Some nights, he skipped dinner to stretch what little food he had left. Still, he told himself, it's temporary. One day, this will pay off. A lesson in value. One Friday evening, after everyone left the office, Chloe found David still working at his desk. Hey, she said, leaning against the doorframe. You're still here? Yeah, just finishing the client report for Monday. She smiled. You're a hard worker. You remind me of myself when I started. David looked up. Were you an intern too? Oh yeah, she said, laughing. I worked for free for 4 months. I thought that was normal. Then I realized, she paused, choosing her words carefully, sometimes companies use that word experience to make you forget your worth. David sat back, thinking about that. Still, Chloe continued, you're doing great. Just don't lose yourself trying to prove you belong. Okay? He nodded. Thanks, Chloe. As she left, her words lingered in the air that night. While walking home through the cold streets, David thought about everything, the job, the city, the struggle. He was giving his time, his energy, his hunger, all for free, and then he realized something new. The city wasn't just teaching him that nothing is free. It was teaching him how much his own time was worth. He looked up at the glowing skyline and whispered to himself, one day, I'll make them pay for my worth. The winter wind in New York City was cruel that week. It cut through coats, froze fingertips, and reminded everyone how expensive comfort could be. For David, every day was becoming a battle between survival and exhaustion. It had been almost 6 weeks since he started his unpaid internship at Brightwave Marketing. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, took the crowded subway, and arrived at the office before anyone else. Every night, he stayed late, fixing presentations, running errands, proofreading campaigns. He didn't complain. He wanted to prove he was worth keeping. But lately, even coffee couldn't keep his energy up. His rent was overdue again, and his landlord had started slipping notes under his door. One evening, David sat in his dimly lit apartment, his laptop on the floor, eating dry cereal straight from the box. He looked around at the cracked walls and the single light bulb flickering above him. He whispered, I can't keep doing this. Still, the next morning, he showed up at work, tired, pale, and determined. The meeting that changed everything that Friday, Brightwave was buzzing with energy. A big client, Aurora Cosmetics, was visiting the office to discuss their new marketing campaign. Everyone wanted to impress them. David had spent the entire week preparing the client presentation slides. He double-checked every number, every color, every line of text. When the meeting began, he stood in the back of the room, quietly watching as his boss, Mr. Harris, presented the slides. His slides. Here at Brightwave, Harris said proudly, our team created a powerful campaign to expand your brand. The clients nodded, impressed. Harris clicked through the slides, explaining every idea, the color palette, the slogans, the customer analysis, everything David had researched and designed. Not once did he mention David's name. At the end of the meeting, the client stood up, smiling. This is fantastic work, one of them said. Your company has real talent. Thank you, Harris replied smoothly. We work hard here. David clapped politely like everyone else, but his stomach twisted. When the clients left, Harris turned to the team. Great work, everyone. Let's keep this energy going. David, could you grab coffee for everyone? David hesitated. For the first time, his smile cracked. Actually, sir. I was wondering if I could talk about. Not now, Harris interrupted. Just grab the coffee. Thanks. David froze for a second, then nodded quietly. Yes, sir. He left the room, his hands trembling slightly. The breaking point outside, in the freezing air, David stood with 2 trays of coffee cups. His breath turned white in the wind. He looked down at his reflection in the cafe window, tired eyes, wrinkled shirt, a faint shadow of himself. He whispered, I'm not just the coffee guy. When he returned to the office, everyone was laughing, celebrating the client deal. No one noticed him walk in. He placed the cups on the table and stood there for a long moment, watching them. Then, something inside him broke. Quietly, he walked over to his desk, picked up his backpack, and turned to Chloe, who was typing nearby. "Hey," she said softly, "you okay?" David nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah. I just realized something." "What's that?" He looked around the room one last time. "I've been paying for my dream with everything I have, and it's still not enough." She frowned. David, but he was already walking toward the door. The walk home, the cold wind hit his face as soon as he stepped outside. The streets were crowded, but he felt completely alone. He didn't know what to do next. All he knew was that he couldn't keep working for nothing. He found himself wandering through Times Square, where bright lights flashed with words like success, luxury, power. He stared up at them and whispered, "Nothing is free. Not even hope." His phone buzzed, a message from his landlord, "Final notice. Pay by Monday or move out." David stopped walking. For a moment, he felt the world closing in. Then, something strange happened. Instead of fear, he felt calm. He was done waiting. Done hoping for someone else to value him. He would start over, but this time, on his own terms. That night, sitting by his apartment window, watching the lights of New York flicker in the distance, David made a promise: from now on, I'll work, but never for free again. The next morning, David woke up before sunrise to the sound of rain hitting his window. His room was colder than usual, and his phone screen glowed with a reminder from his landlord: "Final notice, rent due." He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, listening to the city outside. Taxi horns. Distant sirens. The rumble of the subway under the street. Everything felt the same, except him. He had quit Brightwave the day before. No job. No savings. No safety net, but there was something different in his chest now, not fear, but clarity. He finally understood that if he wanted to survive in New York, he couldn't wait for someone else to hand him a chance. He had to create his own. The day of empty pockets, David grabbed his old backpack, slipped on his jacket, and walked out into the cold drizzle. The streets were wet and shining under the morning lights. He didn't have a plan, just a direction. He stopped by a food cart near the subway. The smell of fresh bagels made his stomach growl. "How much for a plain one?" he asked. $2, the vendor said. David checked his wallet, only $1 left. He smiled sadly and shook his head. "Thanks anyway." The vendor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, noticed his hesitation. "You look hungry, my friend. Here." He handed him a small bagel wrapped in paper. "Take it." On the house. David was surprised. "Are you sure?" The man smiled. "Yeah. You'll pay me back someday." For a moment, David couldn't speak. He took the bagel gently, feeling the warmth through the paper. "Thank you," he whispered. As he walked away, he thought about how strange life was. The only free thing he had gotten in New York came from a street vendor, not a company. An unexpected idea. He sat on a bench near Bryant Park, eating the bagel slowly, watching people rush by in suits. His mind started racing. He had spent weeks working on marketing projects, creating posters, social media posts, and business plans for someone else. But what if he used that knowledge for himself? He pulled out his notebook, the one he had carried since college, and began scribbling ideas: affordable marketing help for small businesses. Simple logos, social posts, flyers. Freelance, start small, grow big. He didn't need an office. He didn't need a boss. He just needed Wi-Fi, his old laptop, and time. He thought about the food vendor. "Maybe I could help small guys like him," he murmured. "People who can't afford big marketing companies." The more he wrote, the more alive he felt. For the first time in months, David wasn't chasing someone else's dream, he was building his own. The first step that night, back in his apartment, David sat cross-legged on the floor with his laptop open. He created a simple online ad: affordable marketing help for local businesses, logos, flyers, social media, made by someone who understands your hustle. Contact David Miller. He posted it on community boards, Facebook groups, and Craigslist. Then he waited. Hours passed. Nothing. He closed his laptop and leaned against the wall. "It's a start," he told himself softly. "Even the biggest things begin small." A spark of hope. The next morning, his phone buzzed. A new message popped up. "Hi David, I run a small bakery in Queens. I saw your ad online. Could you help me make a flyer for my shop? David stared at the message, his heart pounding. He typed back immediately, yes, absolutely. I'd love to help. It wasn't a big job. It wouldn't make him rich. But it was his for the first time since coming to New York. David smiled, a real, hopeful smile. He looked out his window at the city skyline glowing under the morning sun and whispered, maybe nothing is free, but some things are worth the price. Sunday morning in Queens was quiet compared to Manhattan. The streets were lined with small shops, family-owned stores, and bakeries that filled the air with the smell of freshly baked bread. David stepped off the subway with his old backpack slung over his shoulder. The message from the bakery owner, Mrs. Lopez, had brought him here. He looked up at a small sign that read, Sweet Crumbs Bakery. It was a cozy corner shop with pink curtains and a hand-painted door. Inside, he could see shelves full of cakes, pastries, and cookies shaped like hearts. He pushed the door open. The little bell jingled above him. A woman in her early 50s looked up from behind the counter and smiled warmly. You must be David, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Yes, he replied. Thank you for giving me a chance. Oh, please, she said kindly. Call me Rosa. I'm just happy someone answered my message. I've been trying to make flyers myself, but, she laughed softly, I'm better at baking than designing. David smiled. Don't worry, Rosa. I can help with that. Building trust. Rosa handed him a small box of cupcakes. Try one, she said. You can't make a flyer about something you haven't tasted. David took a bite. It was soft, sweet, and perfect. Wow, he said, these could sell anywhere. She chuckled. That's the problem. I just need people to know about them. David took out his notebook. Tell me about your bakery. Who are your customers? What makes your shop special? As Rosa spoke, he wrote everything down. She told him about her grandmother's recipes, her dream to open a bakery after raising her kids, and how she loved seeing families come in on weekends. David listened carefully. This wasn't just about selling cupcakes, it was about telling a story. The work begins that afternoon. He sat in a corner table with his old laptop plugged into the wall. He started designing, soft colors, simple text, warm photos, something that felt real. The flyer said a Sweet Crumbs Bakery, made with love in every bite, fresh pastries, cakes, and cookies every morning. Come taste the difference. Rosa came over, wiping flour from her hands. Oh my goodness, she whispered. It's beautiful. David smiled. You like it? She nodded. It's perfect. How much do I owe you? David hesitated. He didn't even know what to charge. Honestly, Rosa, pay me whatever you can. She opened the cash register, counted some bills, and handed him $50. David looked at the money like it was gold. It wasn't much, but it was the first real payment he had earned on his own, without a boss, without a company. Thank you, he said quietly. No, Rosa said, smiling. Thank you. You made my dream look beautiful. Word spreads. A week later, Rosa called him again. David, she said excitedly. You won't believe it, more people came in this week than ever before. Everyone said they saw the flyer. David grinned from ear to ear. That's amazing, Rosa. And listen, she added, my friend owns a flower shop down the street. She wants your number. I told her you're wonderful. He froze for a moment. His first referral. His first chain reaction after hanging up. He sat in his small apartment, staring at the $50 bill on his desk. It wasn't about the money, it was about the feeling. He whispered to himself, this is what freedom feels like. The lesson that night, as he walked through the glowing streets of Queens, the words "nothing is free" echoed in his mind again, but this time, they meant something different. Yes, he had paid a price, with his hunger, his sleepless nights, his mistakes, but what he was building now was something money couldn't buy, self-worth. He looked up at the New York skyline in the distance and smiled. Nothing is free, he said softly, but earning it makes it worth everything. Winter slowly faded into early spring, and with it, the city of New York began to thaw, not just the streets, but David's life too. It had been 2 months since he designed that first flyer for Sweet Crumbs Bakery, and now, things were starting to move faster than he ever imagined. Word of mouth after Rosa's Bakery saw an increase in customers. Her friend from the flower shop, Bloom and Vine, called David. Then a small clothing store reached out. Then a cafe soon. David was spending his days traveling across neighborhoods, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, meeting local shop owners who couldn't afford fancy marketing agencies but needed someone to make them look professional. He brought his old laptop, his notepad, and his honest smile. "I'm not a big company," he would tell them, "but I'll work hard for you." And people believed him, because he meant it. One by one, jobs came in. $60 for a flyer. $100 for a logo. $150 for a short-ad video filmed on his phone. It wasn't much, but for the first time in months, David could pay rent on time. He could buy real groceries, not just instant noodles. And every time he handed over a finished project, he felt proud, not because he got paid, but because he earned it. The turning point one day, Rosa called him again. "David," she said, "remember that food festival I told you about? They're looking for someone to design the event's official posters. I told them about you." "Wait," David said, sitting up straight. "A city event?" "Yes," she laughed. "They'll pay well too. Go meet the organizer. I already gave her your number." That evening, David sat across from Ms. Patel, the event manager, in a small coffee shop downtown. "I saw your designs," she said, scrolling through his portfolio on her tablet. "Simple, clean, but full of heart. That's what we want." "Thank you," David said nervously. "I'll do my best." She smiled. "Good. We'll pay $500 for the full project. Are you available?" For a second, David thought he misheard. $500. His voice cracked slightly. "Yes, absolutely." When he left the cafe, he stepped into the cool evening air with a grin that wouldn't fade. For the first time since coming to New York, he felt seen. The work that changed everything. David worked day and night for the next week. He wanted everything perfect: the colors, the fonts, the photos. He walked through markets, took pictures of street vendors, and captured the city's energy. When he finally sent the final design, Ms. Patel wrote back immediately, "This is incredible, David. Thank you for capturing the spirit of New York." She attached a receipt and a $500 payment. David stared at the screen for a long moment, then laughed out loud. The same city that had once refused him a free coffee was now paying him for his creativity. The lesson of the climb. That night, David walked through Times Square, the same place where months ago he had felt broken and lost. Now, the bright lights didn't make him feel small anymore. They inspired him. He thought about all the people who had told him to work for experience, who said exposure was enough, who made him believe that his time had no value. They were wrong. He whispered to himself, "Nothing is free, not even my effort. And that's okay. Because what's earned has power." A new beginning. Before heading home, David stopped by Rosa's Bakery. She handed him a small box tied with a red ribbon. "What's this?" he asked. "Your favorite," she said. "Cupcakes. Payment for making us all look good." He smiled and opened the box. Inside were 5 small cupcakes with frosting shaped like stars. Rosa winked. "You earned them." That night, as he looked out his apartment window at the city lights, David realized something profound. The city hadn't changed. He finally understood that New York never gives anything for free, but it always gives you a chance to earn what you deserve. And David, he was just getting started. The morning sun shone through David's apartment window, lighting up the desk where his old laptop still hummed. A small cup of coffee sat beside it, not instant coffee this time, but real, freshly brewed. Life was finally moving forward. He had clients, a bit of savings, and something even more important, confidence. But life, as always, had one more test waiting. An unexpected email one chilly morning. As David checked his inbox, a new message caught his eye. The subject line read, "A partnership opportunity from Thompson Media Group." He blinked, thinking it must be a mistake. Thompson Media Group was a mid-sized marketing company in Manhattan, the kind of place that had once rejected his job applications when he first arrived in New York. He opened the email. "Hello David, we came across your designs for the New York Food Festival and were very impressed. We're looking for independent creators to collaborate on a new project. Would you be interested in meeting for a discussion?" David stared at the screen, heart pounding. He whispered to himself, "Is this real?" The meeting 2 days later, he stood in front of a tall glass building in Midtown Manhattan. His hands were cold, his shirt freshly ironed, his old backpack replaced by a simple laptop bag. He looked up at the shimmering logo, Thompson Media Group. Inside, the office buzzed with energy, people typing, phones ringing, the smell of coffee and ambition everywhere. A receptionist smiled and said, "You must be David. Please, have a seat. Mr. Thompson will see you shortly." When he entered the conference room, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a friendly smile greeted him. "David, right," he said, shaking his hand. "I'm glad you came. We've been following your work." "Thank you, sir," David said nervously. Thompson gestured for him to sit. "Let me be honest. Your food festival designs, they caught our attention. Clean, emotional, and very human. We could use that kind of voice on a campaign we're launching next month." David leaned forward. "What kind of campaign?" "A citywide small business project," Thompson explained. "Helping local shops promote themselves, the same kind of people you've already been helping. We want someone who understands their struggles." The offer. Thompson smiled and said, "We'd like to bring you on as a design consultant, part-time for now, but paid $3,000 a month." For a moment, the world froze. David felt his chest tighten. $3,000. The same man who once couldn't afford rent was now being offered a consulting job in Manhattan. He swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't even have a degree in design." Thompson chuckled. "We're not looking for degrees. We're looking for talent. And you've proved you have it." The doubt that night, David sat alone in his apartment, staring at the offer letter on his laptop. It was everything he had dreamed of: stability, recognition, money. But a small voice inside him whispered, "What about your independence? The dream of building your own path?" He looked at the city lights outside his window and remembered his first day in New York, hungry, jobless, and invisible. He also remembered Rosa, the bakery owner who gave him his first chance. The people who believed in him before anyone else did. Was he ready to give all that up? He didn't sleep much that night. The decision. The next morning, David went back to the bakery. Rosa was icing cupcakes behind the counter. "You look troubled," she said, smiling. "What's wrong, my friend?" He told her everything: the offer, the money, the choice. Rosa listened quietly, then said something that stuck with him forever. "David, freedom doesn't mean saying no to every opportunity. It means having the power to choose which opportunities fit your dream." Her words hit him deep. He smiled. "You're right. Maybe this isn't the end of my journey, or maybe it's the next step." A new chapter begins. That afternoon, David walked into Thompson Media's office and shook Mr. Thompson's hand firmly. "I'm in," he said. "Welcome aboard," Thompson replied. As David left the building, the cold winter wind brushed against his face. He zipped up his jacket, smiling to himself. For once, he didn't feel like he was running from failure. He was walking toward something greater. He whispered, "Nothing is free, but sometimes, the price you pay leads you exactly where you belong." Spring in New York had arrived. The city was alive again. Street vendors called out on the sidewalks, cherry blossoms bloomed in Central Park, and sunlight spilled between the tall glass towers of Manhattan. David walked out of the subway in a crisp shirt and clean shoes, not expensive, but earned. His backpack carried the same old laptop that had started it all, now patched and worn like a battle scar. It had been 1 full year since he arrived in New York with nothing but hope and an accent that people laughed at. Now, he was walking into the office of Thompson Media Group as a creative consultant. The first big project, the new campaign, was called Voices of the City. It was meant to highlight the small businesses of New York, the same kind of people who had once helped David survive: bakers, barbers, tailors, cafe owners, and flower sellers. David's job was to visit each place, listen to their stories, and help design posters and videos that told the truth, not fancy advertising, but real people, real dreams. When he met those business owners, they reminded him of Rosa, the bakery lady. He smiled and said to them, "I know exactly how it feels to start from nothing." Each story he helped share became personal, each design carried emotion, and slowly, people in the company began to notice his heart more than his resume. Recognition. 3 months later, Thompson called him into his office. "David," he said, "your campaign has gone viral. People love it, the honesty, the emotion, the humanity. We've been flooded with calls from new clients. David smiled. That's great news, sir. Thompson stood up, extended his hand, and said, "You're officially promoted. Full-time. Lead designer. Congratulations." For a few seconds, David couldn't speak. His throat tightened. He had once begged for a job like this, and now, he had earned it with his own effort. He shook Thompson's hand and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." Giving back. The first thing David did with his new paycheck was simple. He went back to Sweet Crumb's bakery. When Rosa saw him walk in, she gasped. "David! My favorite designer!" He laughed. "Guess what? I got promoted." She clapped her hands. "I knew it. I told you, hard work always pays off." David handed her a small envelope. "Here," he said. She frowned. "What's this?" "Money," David said softly. "To help you expand your bakery. Call it a return on the kindness you showed me." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "David, you don't have to," he smiled. "I know. But I want to." The meaning of nothing is free. That night, David sat on a bench in Central Park, the city lights glowing behind him. He thought about everything, the nights he had gone hungry, the rejection, the doubt, the pain. He realized that nothing is free had never meant the world was cruel. It meant that everything worth having, respect, skill, freedom, must be earned. He whispered to himself, "Nothing is free, but when you pay the price with hard work and patience, life gives you something priceless." He smiled at the sky, feeling the cool breeze of the city that had once scared him. Now, it felt like home. 1 year later, David stood on a stage at a small business conference, telling his story to young immigrants and dreamers like him. He ended his speech with these words, "When I came to America, I thought success was about money, but I learned that success is about earning your own worth. Remember this, nothing in life is free. But if you're willing to pay the price with honesty, effort, and faith, you'll get something no one can ever take away, yourself." The crowd stood and applauded. Some had tears in their eyes. Final scene. As he left the stage, Rosa handed him a cupcake, the same kind he had eaten on his first job. He laughed. "You never change, Rosa." She winked. "And you never stop growing." David looked around at the people, the city, and the life he had built from nothing. Then, with a smile full of peace and pride, he said quietly to himself, "Nothing is free, and that's what makes it beautiful."